Destiny. I'm back today with a birth story. I just wanted to tell my story on Harper's birth and what exactly it was like for me. I was induced at the hospital. My intentions were just to go in and, have a natural birth, not natural as in no meds or anything like that. I did want an epidural, but to basically labor at home and then head in as soon as I could. So we had gone in on the 28th. May 28th was Harper's due date, and the doctor said I hadn't progressed from the week prior. When I had gone in, I was only a centimeter dilated. He said it wasn't even really that. It was about a fingertip. I wasn't really progressing and the baby hadn't dropped yet. He said that I could wait until 41 weeks. He didn't think the progress would really change, but he wasn't sure. And if I wanted to be induced, we could schedule it. We had decided to go forward with the inducing because she had an issue with her placenta. Her umbilical cord was at the bottom of the placenta instead of the center, and my concern was if we went to 41 weeks, she would be a bit larger, and the issue with that condition is if the baby becomes distressed or mom becomes distressed and starts, panicking, and the umbilical cord could be ripped. I decided to go with inducing. He actually scheduled it for 2 days later on May 30th. So I'd called the hospital as we had left that night, and they scheduled us to come in at 6 p.m. that day. So on the 30th, we went into work, finished everything up with our jobs, and left at noon. We came home, we grabbed our bags, we ate a lunch, we dropped off our dogs with my mother-in-law, and we headed to the hospital. Obviously, I was super nervous. We went to the room, filled out all the paperwork, they checked us in, they hooked up the IVs, and we relaxed. Nothing was really happening that night. They weren't going to be starting the oxytocin until 6 a.m. the next morning. They were going to start a very, very low dose to help kickstart things, try to open me up, make the baby drop a bit more, and see if they could help with any dilation to get things started for the next day. We were having some difficulties getting her heart rate with the monitor, so it was really hard to sleep because every time I moved, they would lose her heart rate. Nurses would rush in to locate it. They eventually ended up putting the heart rate monitor on her head, and if any of you had to deal with it, it's like a small tack they put on the top of the baby's head to monitor the heart rate because we were losing her so much with the stomach monitor. So they did do that. 6 a.m. rolled around. My mom showed up at about 5:30. She was going to be in the room during the delivery. So she had came in. I hadn't slept much. So obviously I was really tired and was just ready to get this going. So they came in, they started the dose, and I didn't really progress much. Wasn't really feeling any pain. It was just kind of like period cramps every now and then. By 10:30 a.m. I was in the bathroom. I actually had to go into the bathroom because I was sitting on a rocking chair, trying to kind of work my way through some of the contractions as they were getting a little bit more painful, but not too bad. And I was telling the nurse I felt like I had to push, and she was like, no, you don't need to push, like, calm down, you're fine. And I just kept saying, like, I feel like there's a pushing feeling. So she told me to try to use the bathroom. I went to the bathroom. I had gone to the bathroom. I got up, flushed the toilet, went to churn, and my water broke. So in my head, that was like, oh my gosh, it's go time, which I had clearly read up on, that your water can break really early on, and you might not even really be dilated. Like my case, I was only 1.5 centimeters dilated. Not really much going on there. So at about 1 p.m., contractions started getting a lot more painful. I'd say they were about 4 or 5 at that point. I was 3 centimeters dilated. The nurse had came in and said I was at the point where I could get an epidural if I wanted one. I wanted to wait out a bit longer because it wasn't super painful, but she had said because it takes a while to get the anesthesiologist up to the room, you want to do it before it gets painful. So I changed my mind and said, okay, I'll place the order in for it. The nurse had to change the bag out, so blood had gone into the line for my IV, which was in place right here. They couldn't clear the line, so they ended up having to Rhea put a new spot in on an IV, and it was the most painful. It was absolutely painful. They were fishing around first off, which if anyone's had that done, it hurts. And the location in which they were doing it hurt even more. I actually did it right here, if you can see. It was painful, and because I wanted the epidural, the nurse had put a new the saline solution or whatever it is that keeps you hydrated. They put a new bag up, and they required that bag be emptied before I get the epidural. So it was a brand new bag. They turned it on an extremely fast drip. I was freezing. It basically caused me to start shivering and shaking uncontrollably because I was so cold. So they came up to do the epidural, and I was already in pain, so I was kind of not like hunching over at that point when the contraction would get its strongest, and then I was visibly shaking because I was freezing. They pumped the whole bag in me in about 30 minutes, which is really fast. They cleared out the room, which I didn't know that they did that when you got an epidural. Nobody could be in the room besides you, the anesthesiologist, and a nurse. So they went in. You have to stay extremely still, obviously, if you've had one, you know. And they poked it in my back, and they asked how I was feeling. I told them I felt a burning sensation in my back, like something was running fluid. They said that wasn't right, which scared me. And then they had to poke again. So they had to go to a new location. They went and did it. They put the catheter in. They had me lay down, and they did everything. There was an issue with the machine, so they kept having to switch out machines. And then everything was finally done. At that point, I said I was 3 centimeters dilated. The epidural was in by 2:40 p.m. and my contractions were steady at that point, 5 minutes apart. Once that medicine actually kicked in, it took, I think, about 20-30 minutes. It wasn't very long. I fell asleep. Oh, and they had me with a peanut ball in between my legs, so it looked really, really funny. I will put a picture right here of it. So they had a peanut ball, and then I was passed out. At about 6 p.m. they checked me, and I woke up. I was 90% effaced and 5 centimeters dilated, which was really good for, you know, about 3 hour difference. They said it could take like 2 hours for a centimeter, if that. So being 2 centimeters dilated in 3 hours was really good. They predicted at that point I would probably give birth like, some were saying like 10 p.m. and some were saying like 2 a.m. So I was thinking, okay, I've still got some time. Actually 7:30 rolled around, and I was fully dilated, and she just needed to drop. And at that time, our nurse that we absolutely loved, because we had gone to the hospital for this nurse, she was actually our midwife prior, and then the OB's office canceled that program, and she went back to the hospital to be a nurse, was on shift. She came into my room and had me on my knees facing the back of the bed and swaying back and forth with contractions to help the baby drop. She had me do that for as long as I could. I think I did it for about 15 or 20 minutes, and within that time frame she was right there. They had me sitting at the end of the bed, and she checked. She said, there's no cervix, she's there, like, let me go get the OB. They told me to hold out as long as I could. The longer I waited and let her drop more, the shorter I would have to push. They said it'll take about 2 hours. They said for most first-time moms, about 2 hours of pushing. So I held out till about, I want to say it was about 9 p.m. Because I had done the swaying back and forth at that point. It was about 8 p.m. when they had checked again, and I held out till 9. It is a single, it was the weirdest feeling. I kept feeling the need to push, but I just kept like basically as weird as it sounds, I was like swallowing it down, like, you can't push now, just hold it out. It really does feel like you need to poop. There's no no TMI to that, but it does. You just feel like you have to keep swallowing it down, like you're stuck in a place where you can't go to the bathroom. So just suck it in and then let it go, and then with each passing contraction it would, you know, go away. They came in. I had, at that time, my dad was in the room, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my mom. My dad, my father-in-law, mother-in-law went out into the hallway. My mom stayed in the room, and then my husband was there. One of our OBs was in the office, or in the room with us. She was helping assist with the birth, and then our favorite nurse was also in the room. They propped my legs up. My husband held one, and then my mom stood on my side to, you know, hold my hand, support me through it. We started pushing. I requested the oxygen mask. I felt when they had given it to me for my, I believe I had used it for during the epidural. I'm not 100% sure. I used it at some point. I know it helped when I was pushing through that, like trying to swallow that pain with the contractions. I pushed for 30 minutes and she was out, which they said was really good for being a first-time mom. A lot of people, it's about 2 hours at least, and she was out in 30 minutes. It wasn't horrible. Again, my experience is different than everybody else's. I had an epidural, so I didn't really feel anything until the point when I got to her shoulders. I could feel that. That's when it started wearing off, because they had obviously pulled everything out before I had her, so the medicine starts going down. Pushing her out wasn't extremely painful. It was a lot less painful than I thought it would be. Again, I was on an epidural. Wasn't really feeling much. The most painful portion, I would have to say, was the stitches. I had a 2nd-degree tear. It wasn't bad, but it was painful. They stitched it up. It took a really long time. I know it's stitches, so it obviously doesn't take, you know, it takes a bit to make sure they're doing it correctly. But it seemed to take forever, and that was like the worst pain, as I just kept getting worse because the medicine was wearing off. So they, you know, cleaned her up, made sure everything was all good. I was stitched up and we were good to go. The, you know, placenta was pushed out, and then she went up on my chest right after, and she peed. Right when she got up on my chest, she had peed. So she was 8 pounds. She was 20.5 inches long, and her head was 13 3/4 inches. So she was a pretty good sized baby. She was right at the edge of 7 pounds, so they just called it an even 8 pounds. They said, I'm pretty sure if she hadn't peed, she would have been that 8 pounds. So she was all healthy. We were both good. Family came in. My dad, my father-in-law, and mother-in-law got to meet her, take some pictures, and then that was it. So overall, it wasn't a horrible experience. I know some people have really, really horrible experiences with inductions and epidurals, and I was pretty happy with ours. It was a really, really easy birth for me personally. I know a lot of people have different experiences. If you want to share your birthing experience down below in the comments, just let me know. If you have any ideas for next week's video, that would be great also. And that, I will see you next week. Alright, bye!